right, so hey everybody, welcome back. We are in week 6. This is our last week of coding boot camp in this cohort. So we appreciate everybody that's online. I know some folks are just following along on videos. Totally fine. This is self-paced, so stick up with it. Make sure that you're reaching out for help if you get stuck anywhere, if you have any problems or anything like that. We're on day 11. We're going to complete our application today. So we're going to write to the last of our operations. And then we should have plenty of time to refactor and do everything in a slightly different way and talk about some options of doing it, why you might do it a different way. Generally speaking, this week is more advanced topics. So next time on the last day after we finish building our app, we're going to talk about, as advanced topics, we're going to talk about versions and version control systems, specifically Git, and how we use things like GitHub to save our work and work collaboratively with other folks on their projects and your own project. So what I started saying a little bit before we started recording, Steve and I were chatting about things, and I would love it if you all from this course, whether you're online now right now in the class or if you're following along in the videos, would get to the point where you feel comfortable contributing to our open source project through GitHub, and use the things that we talk about on Thursday to open a pull request with us, change something in what we have, maybe contribute to some of the work. We have some machine learning stuff if you're into that, and we have some other things that we could do. But all the things we talk about in this course are relevant to what we do at Hired Labs, and it's all open. And we would love for you to get involved with it that way and kind of build your portfolio of real world projects that you work on. If not ours, then others through GitHub. But that's gonna be for next time. So the first one that we're gonna finish is this app today. So as a reminder, we're doing CRUD operations. We're finishing up. So we got our create, read, update, and delete. We started off with read. That was just viewing the list of tasks in the context of the thing that we're making. Last time we did our create operation where we can make a new task. This time it leaves us update and delete. So delete, we're going to do very quickly. It's going to be just a few lines of code because we're going to use the JavaScript that we wrote earlier to confirm. If you recall, that's what we set it up to do, is confirm if a task wants to be deleted. So we're not going to go through the steps of making a whole route and URL. I mean, we still have to make URL, but we're not going to make a template right away for the delete thing and do it directly in Django. We're going to use the JavaScript we did earlier. So it'll be really quick when we do that one. But update's going to take us a little bit to go through. And just as a refresher, this is sort of what we're talking about overall, the CRUD operations in terms of the internet and requests going through APIs back to a backend server and then coming back as responses. We talk about the recreating and reading in different terms as post and get. Those are the kind of things that we're mostly working with. We're going to continue to work with those today when we do our update. So we're going to get something from the database, and then we're going to post something back into that place. Like we're going to change that information and post it back into that. So it's going to be a get and a post that we're dealing with. And then we're also going to do, well, technically it's going to be a put, and it's not really a post because we're not creating a record. I'm sorry. It's going to be get and put technically, but we're not going to call it put. We're still going to call it post. And it's because it's going to be overriding. We can get into the details of why that is, but those are what we're going to be dealing with. And then we're going to delete, which is the same. And then just as a refresher again, REST is a popular framework for this kind of whole interaction of things. And if you want to look further into what that means and why people use it and what it is, just keep in mind kind of like the key thing about it is it doesn't save information about the client side, which is usually a user with a browser, between requests in the server. So again, today we're going to be doing our update operation. Any questions about those concepts? That all should be fairly driven home by now, but any questions before we move on to our hands-on coding portion? Great. So we're over in Python Anywhere. And we are going to do like we always do, start off in console and get ourselves set up for our working environment. See if I closed it down from last time. I may not have, so we may already be there. Nope, I'm in my home. We're ready to go. All right, so let's do source, name of our virtual environment, bin, and activate, just like we do at the beginning of any time that we start working. And then we're going to change into our top level project directory, my site, where our manage.py file is. So we're not going to do anything directly here in the console right away, but this is always a good place to start, just in case you do. It's a good habit to get into. I think today, for the most part, we're just going to be working on our files. We might come back here and make something, actually, or rename something in here. That's about it. So let's move over into our file directory, and we're going to the file editor that we normally do. So I'm just going to hit files. I'm going to keep my console closed for now. Go into our my site to do, and we're going to write ourselves a view. So we're going to go to our views.py, right? So we're at project level. We're going to go down to our application level, and we're going to look at our views. All right. So in the same pattern that we've done before, we have the views that we've already worked with. We're going to do a very similar thing as we did last time with our create task. If you recall, we had our bit of logic that kind of checked what kind of method it was. And we decided that if it was a post method, meaning that it contained information we wanted to save on the server, we served up our form. Otherwise, we gave them a blank form. And that was the general flow. So we're going to follow that same thing basically for our update. The only difference here is that we have to first grab an existing record out of the database. So we're going to do this again as a functional view like we have in the past. We're going to write another function and go down a couple of lines. Actually, I'm going to give us a little bit more space so we're not so crowded here, move up on the screen. But I'm on about line 37. We're going to start off the way we have with any function with DEF and define our function. And then we're going to do update task. So we're going to update a single task. And like all time, like everything else we've done so far, just think it back to that API. We're handling a request from a user. This time, though, unlike the other ones that we've written, we're also going to pass this PK argument. PK, anybody who is not taking this class for the second time, have a good guess of what that might be, what PK might stand for. So Chris and Michael, not you, Steve or Cody, if you're online.
Package.
Good guess. No. Think about the context of what we're doing. We're grabbing a task out of a relational database. What might PK stand for?
Pick, poke, post.
Close. Good. These are all good guesses.
Yeah.
Primary key is what it stands for.
PK.
Primary key, the most important thing for a relational database, right? So
I said key. I got it.
You got it, man. You nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah. So, all right. So yeah, that's the idea here. So that we're grabbing it out of the database by its primary key. So that's how we know that we have, because it's the unique identifier in a relational database. We know we're using a relational database. So this is going to be our unique identifier within that database. So we're going to use our PK, and Django generally knows what that is. It'll expect it in places as a thing. So we're going to now, as our first thing, is grab our actual instance of that task model. If you remember, we made that as a class, and each time we saved one, we created one in the function above. We create an instance of that class, right? So now we're going to grab that one instance. We're going to instantiate it ourselves in a task variable, lowercase, as we've done before. We're going to set it to the uppercase task, right? So this is what's going to boil down to SQL. This is much like we've done in the past, where we've grabbed things to look at them when we did task object all on our view tasks. Same sort of thing here. So we're doing which, this is so from which database we're looking at, right? What do we want to get out of it? Objects dot, and then we're going to do get this time instead of all. So because we're going to get a specific one. So this time we are actually explicitly saying get, and we're going to get by the ID, and we're going to send it this primary key that we set it here, right? So what's going to happen here when we call this function, this view, the function is going to expect us to send it the primary key along with the request. And then we're going to take that primary key and get that particular object from the task table that has this primary key. So that's what this line of code is doing. And we're setting that into a Python variable of task that we can now use and do other things with. So this is the main difference between what we've done in the past, what we did with our create task, and what we did with our view tasks. It's similar to view tasks in some ways because we're grabbing one specific one, but we're not viewing all of them. We're viewing one specific one. And now we could do some of the logic like we did before in our creation of a task, where we have to use a form, and we do some other things. Because again, keep in mind, this is an update, right? So we're going to present this back to the user with information. But the first time that we run through our logic, much like we do with create task, we're going to handle the instance of someone sending us back the updated data. So, and we're going to save that into the database, right? So we're going to say if, like we did before, request dot methods. We check the method of the request, is equal to, we'll follow convention, say post as a string. So we're checking in this conditional logic statement if the request method is post out of those things we discussed. What we want to do is set a form using our task form that we made before, that we've imported in our other step earlier for creation of tasks. Is the exact same form. We don't have to make a new one. And this time, we're going to send it, just like we did, the post information from the request. So this is all very, very similar to what we did when we're setting up our creation of a task, right? So it's very similar. Going to be some small changes here. Now we have our form sent out. It's got the post information from the request. Now we got to check, like we have. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more thing we got to put in here. So because we're filling this in, we're updating. I almost forgot one of the nuances. We have to instantiate this class with a binding to this particular object that we're doing, because we're going to make some changes to it. We're going to do some things with it. So a best practice here, there's other ways to do this, but a best practice is at this point, pass what's called instance, this keyword, and set it to your task variable that we set up here. And what this is going to do, this is called form binding, and it's going to bind this form to this particular instance in the of the task. Right, so it's going to make sure it's got the right fields, make sure it lines everything up properly. So it's a good step to do. And when we go down to our get method call, when it goes and the user goes to do the update in our what was a blank form when we created something, we're going to pass this instance again, and that's going to give the user the information that's already in the database so that they can see what they're changing. It's going to be helpful. So this is one of the things that we want to do that's different from what we did before. All right, so now we have to check again if the form is valid using what's built in. So if form dot is underscore valid, it's built in method, so open and close parentheses. And since it's another if statement, we had another indented block ending with a colon, and then yet again another indented block, so we're 3 indentations in. Seeing if our form is valid. And we're not going to do anything crazy here. We could do some more logic or add things or do some other stuff with it if we wanted to, but we're just going to save this form directly, use the built-in functionality of a form object, and just do save. All right, so then what's the last thing we have to do from here? We've saved our form. What's the last step that we require now?
We got to return something.
Yes, we got to return something. Very good. So we don't have a return statement in here. And what kind of thing are we returning?
Render request, and then the task, the primary key, post, the primary
Okay.
something.
I like where you're going with that. Okay, cool. So let's think that through for a second. So what we're going to do is we have to render something, right? So you're in the right neighborhood. We're going to send the user. Ideally, think about the user's standpoint. Where do we want this to send them once they're done updating this task? Where do we want them to go? Do we want them to go with the request into the server?
Back to the view task.
There you go. Back to the view tasks. Very good. So we do redirect them back to the view tasks, because the saving and all that stuff is going to go towards the server, and we now need to take the user and send them some other place. So we redirect the user after saving, and we use that handy reverse to look up where we want to go. And so we're going to do the namespaced, as you said, view dash tasks as the name of our, as a string. And then there's 2 closing parentheses because we have our reverse to use our namespace, and then we have redirect, which is where we send people, how we send people to a place after they've submitted something to the database.
Now, what is the reason why the render up above is using a path, and the one that we're doing right now is using the URL? We made those changes where basically to do colon is giving it, go to your to do application and look up the view task view. So if you look at,
if you look at these
above, you're directing it to a URL path, rather than using that.
Right. So we're not using the reverse. We could find a way to just put this reverse to have these consistently all the way across, but there's just not a need for this. This is kind of just the first time someone comes here and just drop it in this way. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, we could absolutely do it consistently and like run everything, refactor everything through a reverse. But
I mean, if it's not a reverse, shouldn't it up above, shouldn't it be to do colon create task?
this right here,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's
But I
not.
know
No,
that breaks things.
the reason it's not is because it's not reversing. Like we're not using reverse up here. That's why we don't write the task. Like we write it out as a
Okay.
straight, like a Linux file directory path, like the full path, right? Which is the same as sort of an HTML directory, right? And this is just because we're using reverse is why we write it with this syntax. Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm not answering your question well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
so
just trying
it's
to work
really
it out
like
in my head. When do you,
yeah,
the
when
why
are
you use
when are
each
you
one
doing one
was,
reversing one and
yeah.
not reversing the other? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I thought the whole point of that whole exercise we did from the last class, which was
Yeah.
basically taking these elements and you're doing those URLs
Mhm.
as a registered app,
Mhm.
was so that you would be doing that to reduce confusion later on by maintaining consistency, saying, go to do, look up this view,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
everything you need. You have your
Right.
forward, you have your reverse, you have all your stuff, it's all there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yet up above, you're not doing it, and then down below you are.
Right. Right.
So
I get what you're saying. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And so, like, again, so some of these things are because I'm demonstrating how all of this stuff is done. Some of these things are optionally, you can refactor it to write it one way or another. Some ways it's just easier to do that as convention. You know, this one is one that I'm comfortable doing it this way. This is how I know to do it that works really consistently and does make sense. I understand that yes, that confusion, it's possibly confused, like why do you do it here versus that way here? And I may not be able to give you the clearest answer as to why that is. Like I know for sure that when you're redirecting people like this, reversing is the absolute best way to do it. I'm not sure if it's the only way. I'm pretty sure we could refactor all this to write it a different way, but this is again the simplest way that I know how to do it that makes sense and is clear. So sometimes there's consistency for consistency's sake. Sometimes there's ways you're comfortable doing it that make sense and work. I'm not sure if I can answer that in a better way than that. But it's also partly for demonstrative purposes, right? Like we show that these things are sort of, there are options on ways to do it. Like we're going to refactor into classes later, and I hopefully can explain why you would or would not want to do that. But it's also really an optional thing, you know, like it depends on the scenario you're in, right? All these things are kind of that dependent, you know, even using functions in the first place. You don't have to do this with functions at all, you know? But is that answering your question well enough?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Cool. Because I feel like I may not be. But
Jeff, I got a question for you.
Sure. What's up?
With all these built-in arguments for the objects, like in the future,
yeah,
how best or what term should I use to like Google like those arguments?
Like, what do you mean?
Like a request,
like these things?
Yeah.
So, if you just look up in the documentation of, you know, Django's got really good documentation, and just look up their views. Like, if you just look up view, and I mean, you probably literally type instance, you know, attribute or something like that, and you'll find, Stack Overflow is a really good place for discussions about these sorts of things if you haven't gone there before. But the Django documentation itself is really solid, explaining all this stuff.
Got it.
And you know, like you know, these how this works and what you're using and what you're saying, and again in more depth as well. So so Chris, to your question, that might be a better place to go to answer more articulately why you would do it this way here and this way here, or why you would maybe want to make it consistent or whatever the case may be. So kind of the same answer to both of you.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, that works for me.
Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Chris.
Yeah, sure. Cool. All right. So once we got that, so that's our post method. That's when we send information over that we want to save and we want to commit that to the database. So now we're going to handle the other situation where the method is not a post request. So our else condition, which is again it's one indentation in, so it's the same level as this outer if, not the inner if. So our else condition is, you know, capturing anything that's not a post method, which again, we're going to assume this is going to be when people first come to the site or first come to this URL. And it's going to be very similar to what we did up here. So again, Chris, we're going to take this same kind of syntax stuff and we're going to add it down here. It's basically the same thing that we're going to do, except we're going to use a different template. And we're actually going to make a small change here. We're going to use the same template, but we're going to rename this one because there's no point in rewriting an entirely new template when all we're changing basically is whether we're updating or creating the form itself and the template itself are really going to be the same. So we're just going to rename this to create and update task, and then just link it to both to make it a little bit faster. All right. Otherwise, it's going to be the same stuff that we did here. So form, task, and in fact, you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this to make it easier. Our entire else statement from our create above. I'm going to make it the same. And just cover it over here, right? Okay, cool. So we have this. The only big differences here are that we're also going to pass, again, the instance setting to task that we did before in here, because this is going to give us the ability to read what's already in the task in the form. So it's going to pre-populate all this stuff in the form. So on our line, my line 45 inside of our else statement, we instantiate our form using our task form, and we send it instance equals task, which again, is the task object that we created on line 38, right? So it's just the same thing we did up here in row 40. And this right here, when we go again in our non-post request method, it's going to give us the pre-filled form information based on what's already in the database. So the user has something to look at. All right, so the other thing that we want to do is we want to add our task into this dictionary, similarly to the way we did with the form, because we're going to take some information out of the task and present it to the user, say like which task they're updating and what they're doing with it. So this is an example of how you can expand this context to include other things. If you do some other logic, you make some other objects in here, you could pass them to your front end by just adding them to this dictionary. So I put in a closing sort of comma, trailing comma here at the end, again, just to add, if we add more things, I don't have to remember to put one in the line above it as well. And as I mentioned before, we're going to rename this to create dash update dash task dash HTML. And we'll have to likewise do that up here, because we're going to go change the name of that file. The reason being, in that file, we're going to use the same form and everything. So once we've got our tasks set up and we have our view set up like this, we have our task going to our front end. Let's save this. And what is our next step once we made our view? What do we normally do when we're adding functionality?
Map a URL.
Map a URL. There we go. All right. So back in the same level. So we already saved this. So we're going to go back up to our to-dos, or to-do directory, URLs. And very similar to what we've done already, I'm just going to copy and paste this line because it's going to be the same thing, right? You have to write everything exactly by hand. This time we're going to be updating. So we're not going to be making a new tab. We're going to update a task. And this time we have to tell it, we're going to be sending it our primary key, right? It's going to be expecting a primary key to be coming along. And it'll display that in the URL. There are ways to kind of cover this and make it, more hidden. But this is also a very standard way to send this information across through your projects. And we're not creating a task as the name of this. We're doing update dash task, right? And then we also likewise don't want to use the create task view. We want to use the update task view. All right. So now we've added our URL. So it should be taking in, as we accounted for, the primary key. We're using our update task view, and we change the name to update dash task so that we can reference this. So save it. All right. Now, what would we have to do next normally? We've mapped a URL.
You have to find a template.
Templates. Very good. So we're in our to-do directory. We're going to use our to-do templates because we are, again, talking about creating. So that's an app level thing that's happening. So we're creating, we're updating, which we're using what we were using before our create task dash HTML. And if you remember, this form right here is kind of the main part that we've got. This is the main functionality that's going on here. We're going to use that exact same form. There's nothing special about this being creation versus updating. So we're going to use the same thing. We're just going to rename this to match what we're talking about, and then use some of the built-in logic here just to basically change this heading to say it's an updating of a task and give some information to the user about which task they're updating versus this new task thing. And then that's really all we're going to do. So let's rename that. Let's rename this file. I'm going to move out of this so it doesn't create two files for me. I'm going to go back up to my top level. So the directory. So we just have this, keep this right here. And then I'm going to open my consoles in a new tab. And we should be still, it should take us directly back into the place we were before. So I'm in my top level working directory. And now I'm going to use MV. This is something you could also, you just open it up as save as and rename it and then delete the old one if you wanted to. But the built-in MV command in Linux is really helpful because it actually is for renaming things. That's kind of its main function that people use it for, even though I think it's short for move. So what we do is we give the full path to the source, and then the target is basically what we see. It's like the source, where it is now, and then the target is what we want it to be later. So we can move this and rename it at the same time. If we want it to be in the same place, we're just going to give it its full full directory path. And I'm using tab complete again to make sure that I am using existing places that are out there. So we're going to use the full path to the existing file name, right? So it's my site to do templates to do create-task.html. And I'm going to give it the new place that I want it to go. So that's the source. This is the target. So I'm going to do my site / to do. It's going to go down to a new line. This is still the same thing. I haven't hit enter. It's just wrapping around on the screen. Again, templates. Move this Zoom stuff out of my way. To do. And then again, we recall we're doing create update task.html is the new name of the file we want it to be. So we're renaming basically our create-task.html template to create update task.html. So, all right, so that should have renamed it. So go back here. I haven't refreshed this browser yet, but I'm back in my files. So my templates, I'm to do, I'm in that directory. If I refresh, it should change from create task to create update task.html, and it has. So that matches the reference that we know that we called earlier. So let's go in here and do the logic change that we need to update our heading and make it, you know, more interesting. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a new heading here to handle the scenario where it's an updating a task and not just new task. We're basically just going to copy this H3 element here that says new task, and right above it, we'll just add our update task. Now what we're going to do is separate. This thing is not cooperating with its spacing. Again, not relevant in HTML, just kind of annoying for me. So we're going to use Django's built-in tags. Once again, the front-end template tags. We're going to use the curly bracket, %, and I'm going to close it before I forget, %, curly bracket. And we'll use our if statement. And if you recall in our view, we passed a task to this view when we were updating it. Because if you recall, when we update a task, we have to first grab a task out of the database. So coming here for the first time, the difference between creating a task and updating a task will be the presence of that task object in the context object, right? So we can just simply use that. So if task, meaning if this is true, this whole statement is true, meaning there is a task, then print this out, say update task. Otherwise, so in our else statement, so we'll do our curly brackets, %, else, %, curly brackets, and then we'll do our new task, because if there is no task element in the context element that's passed in from our view, then it's a new task. It's not updating anything. We didn't grab anything from the database, so there's nothing there to grab, or there's nothing there to show. And so it's a new task. And so then we're going to end our if statement before we forget with our curly bracket, %, end if, all one word, lowercase %, then curly bracket. And then since we have our task object available to us, we can also give, like we said, the user some helpful information besides what's written inside of it, whatever that information might be. We can give it all kinds of stuff. In our case right now, there's not a lot of other information to give the user outside of what's already in the form. But just as an example of how to do that, we're going to use the double curly braces that we've used before and use that task object, and we'll just pass the ID. So we know the ID number of the task that's in there. And that's going to be its primary key. So we need to set something else called ID and override the primary key setting. So it's just going to be the primary key that's in there. Again, this may not be something that you realistically want to present to an end user, but this is just kind of showing the semantics of how you would do presentation of anything that's not getting sucked up in the form and presented to the user as part of the form that's in there. All right, so that's pretty much it. We can just save that, and this is the only update we really need to make. Otherwise, the form is the same as it's going to be otherwise. We're going to have our cancel buttons, submit buttons. It's just that if it came in with information already there, it's going to populate it with that information. If not, it'll populate a blank form. This end, the computer doesn't care. So once we refresh this or reload it, so we already renamed our create update task call in our create task view, so we shouldn't have to do anything else. What else do we need to do now that we've made our update task view, we've updated our URL, and we've updated our template? What's the last piece that we got to do before we go test this out?
Find some navigation.
Yes, some navigation. Okay, so where is this navigation going to go, do you think? Because we've done most of our navigation up to now has been in the nav bar on the top. Is this going to go to the same place?
Is it the URL?
We're going to use a URL. It's not in the urls.py now. It's going to be in one of our front end templates like this one, but it's not going to be here. So it's going to get us to here, but it's got to be in a similar one. And most of the time we've been doing them in the my site level templates in our base.html in the nav bar. Is that where we're going to do this one, or does it go somewhere else, do you think? Because where do we put our create button? We put that on in which template? Anybody remember?
Let me look it up again.
Was it project level, or was it just think logically?
Views? Was it views?
No, not views. Just think logically for a second. Don't look at your notes. Just take a step back, think logically, right? So is what we're making an overall project level thing, or is it an application level thing?
It's an application level thing.
Application, very good. So if it's application level, which templates are we looking for? Are we looking for project level or application level?
We would still be in the same folder.
Yep, we'd be in the same folder. So if we go there, and it's not the one we were just in, that only leaves us this one, right?
Yes.
So there we go. So by default, if you don't remember which one it goes in, it's the only one that's available. But in this case, so we'll look at it in the views.task. Again, going at it logically, right? So this is the place in which we are grabbing an individual task, right? So this is the other place outside of the updating of task that we're taking one task and we're doing something with it. So we're displaying them one at a time. And if you recall, I should actually navigate to my site, right? So it's what higher level. There we go. You don't need about. Okay, so this is displaying it, right? So this is our display straight across, and this is our one item, right? So imagine where on this, if we're updating this specific task, right? Where do you think we could put the button to do that? We want to tie it to this task somewhere visually, right? So we want it to probably be in this row as well. Yeah?
Yes.
Make logical sense? Okay, cool. So there's a bunch of ways we could do that, right? But basically it should be in this, somewhere in this element that we're adding the information to make this what it is. So we could add another row, or add another column rather, and add another table data point like these are, and put it alongside and have another like an update button next to it. What I tend to like to do is just make the title of the thing that we're looking at, just make that a link, make it a hyperlink that people can click on. It's kind of intuitive. That's what people tend to do as users, right? So like think about your end users and who they are, what they might do. People tend to just like press the thing that they're looking at, right? So I just make this in a tag, just wrap this whole Django tag, wrap it inside of an a tag. So right now it's in this TD tag. So you could stack these things together, and I'm going to make some space just so we can see what's happening. I'm just going to move this down. And again, HTML doesn't care. So this is more for human readability than anything. And I'm going to put our a tag fully around by cutting our task title. So what this means is that it's going to be in the middle of this link tag, right? So the task title is going to be the text that is written out that will be underlined in blue. Right now it's just this regular text thing, but it's going to turn into the, familiar internet hyperlink of underlined in blue so that everyone knows that that's what it is. So then we're going to do what we've done just about every other time when we do one of these things, and we're going to use the built-in backend stuff in Django to direct us to the proper URL using the href tag built into HTML. So it's an HTML tag, requires double quotation marks. And then we go to our Django tag with the open curly bracket, percentage sign, close curly bracket, so we don't forget. And we use our URL tag to reference which URL we want to use. And we use our namespace to do inside of a Django string in single quotation marks. And we're going to update task this time. And then again, the difference here between what we've done before when we did view task or any of those other things, we need to send it a bit of information about this. Remember, our URL required a primary key. Our view, when we wrote it, required a primary key. So we have to somehow pass this primary key from this task object to the back end from here. So we have it here from the back end. We need to now pass it back to the back end here from the front end, right? So in this, we do the task, which is the object that we're looking at here. So it's the same place that we grab the title, same place we grab the due date, but we're going to pass it that basically, again, the only thing that's remaining, the ID, which is the PK. So this is what we reference on the front end again when we show which task we're updating, gave the user that little piece of information. This is the PK that's required. So this here is not going to be displayed to anybody. This isn't like a security risk. This is how you identify in the database which thing you're talking about, which thing you want to update. This is how you send it through your URL. It'll expect it. If you forget to put this ID in here and tell your URLs to expect it, you'll break your site. So this is all three of these little pieces, these phrases are what's needed for this updating of a task. All right, so that's it. That's pretty much all we got to do on this. So since we're already using the task form creation form that existed, let's reload on the server side since we've done all those updates and changes, and give that a second. We've saved this. And then once that finishes reloading, we'll go back to our site in the browser, refresh it, and it should change to underlining this new task. When I click on it, should take me here where you see it's pre-populated. It gave us a task ID. So this is our first task. This is task number 1. If you remember last time, I actually ended with us being stuck and broken somewhere, and I rebuilt it back up and fixed that error. Never figure out what I was doing wrong, but you know, documentation work, which is good. But so then we'll do this and say, cool, that's our new task. We've updated it. We can submit, and there we go. So now we have a way to update our tasks by clicking on that. And if we add a new task, we'll say, you know, update me, and we'll try to spell it properly. Give us a due date. Say it's to do, hit submit. See if adding a task still works. It does. Then we can update it. So we can set its status to complete. Then we could say again or something. We could change this, change due dates, submit, and there we go. Change the status. So now we have the update operation implemented. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I broke something.
Uh-oh. You broke something. What'd you break? What do you got? What's the error saying at the top? Do you know? Or does it just say something went wrong?
Expected indent in my view P.
Expected indent. Okay, so that means in your views.py, somewhere you didn't indent. I'm guessing in the logic, because there's several indents, because there's like the nested if loops.
Okay.
What line does it tell you? It'll tell you which line to like highlight.
Yeah, line 45.
Yeah, so make sure you got your indentations right, and make sure you check for like colons and stuff like that too. They'll give you that same error.
All right, because it'll wrap around or whatever.
Look at the row above it, because that could be telling you what's going on. All right, cool. So outside of that, Steve, we're gonna kind of crack on and try to get our
Go ahead.
delete operation done. Yeah, absolutely. Keep pressing on. Any other questions? No.
I got it.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's get the delete operation written in there. And as we have time, we can go through refactoring into classes, kind of why you would do that, and what the beauty of it is, what the purpose of that would be. It's in the documentation though too. So if we don't really get to it, if we spend more time doing the delete, talk about how that works, that's fine. We can leave that as sort of like a challenge for you to refactor your own code into classes. Maybe do one as an example tonight, and then you can do the rest on your own. And let's do that. So let's go back to our basically the same things that we've done over and over again. We're gonna start off with anybody. First thing we got to do. We're writing a CRUD operation. We go to our anybody. Shout it out. Where do we go?
We were models, right?
Nope. We already made our model. We're trying to make a model. We go to our. It's the starting point. It's where
Go
we
back to
started
the
today.
views. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Views.
You're
We're doing
making
it-
a new one of what you just did, right?
Yep. Starting over with another one. This one's going to be very fast because, again, we're going to leverage what we did in the JavaScript piece to confirm delete instead of sending somebody and going through this logic, like writing this whole piece of creating a new template and saying, hey, do you want to delete that? Like you're going to do that if you refactor into classes, and you could do that. It's going to expect a template, a delete template, and run through this flow and basically skip the JavaScript that we wrote. But since we wrote that JavaScript and we could use it here and just do the delete operation in Django and use the JavaScript to like confirm that we want to delete or cancel the delete. And we'll just do it that way. So this is gonna be really fast. All right, so let's get that going. So we're gonna define a function. We're gonna do this functional delete just like we have before. So we're gonna define our delete underscore task. And just like when we updated, it's going to take a request and the primary key of the thing that we want to delete. So we're going to go to our database, just like we have in the past, and we're going to grab a task. So we're going to save it into a task variable. We're going to the task table. We're going to look at the objects that are there, and we're going to get, like we did when we updated, the object that has the ID matching our primary key that we passed it. And then very, very simply, we're going to take that task that we created or that we saved, and drew from the database, and we're going to call delete method that's built into it. And that's going to delete the task. And then similarly to updating a task, once we have successfully done it, and since we're not redirecting our users to do any intermediary steps or any other templates or any of those things, we're going to use, again, JavaScript to confirm the deletion. We're just going to redirect people. This is assuming success. So this is going to assume that once we hit this URL, it's successfully deleting the task in question, and then it's going to just redirect our user because it is an interaction with information in the database. We don't want to send the user there. We're going to send them somewhere else. So we're going to use our reverse and go back to the to-do views, right? So to imagine the flow, I should spell that right. View tasks, and then close parentheses. So imagine this flow. We click on the button, wherever that button is. Again, we have to now make a button. We click on the button to delete our task, and then it should pop up with that JavaScript warning that says, "Hey, you sure you want to do that?" And we say okay, and it'll delete our task and put us right back on our view list, our to-do list. So we shouldn't actually navigate away from that to-do list at all.
I have some. Okay, line 55. How do you tell which particular task you're deleting?
So that's with the primary key right here. So this is what selects the specifics of this get. Is going to expect you to give it some sort of like, there's all kinds of ways to do this. You could filter, there's different ways to do it. This is one way to grab things out of your database using get. It's fairly efficient and it works well. And so we're telling it what to get right here. So ID is a primary key, is a keyword that their argument that they're looking for, that they know it's expecting some sort of most likely primary key, right?
Okay.
So this is where what's up?
If you have a series of items
Mhm.
in your database, right?
Yeah.
I'm having trouble understanding how you connect with a particular item. This is just a
Sure. So this is like, so if we walk through this piece by piece, this is like a SQL statement. This will boil down to a SQL statement at some place that's going to say, remember we say like select from where, right? So we're saying select objects from the task table. So we go to the task table, right? And then it's going to say, this is basically the where part. So it's like where the objects in that table meet this criteria only, and then put that those objects meeting the criteria into our task variable. Does that make sense?
okay.
Well,
yeah.
I think his question is basically you've clicked on that URL, right? That task name.
Yep.
And it took you and opened up the task. That's how you know which one you're deleting, because this button's going to be down below rather than submit.
Right.
It's going to be a delete button next to it now, right?
Well, so and that's the thing is it. Yeah. So now we have to
Yeah,
decide. Where
you've
we put this
already
delete
told
button.
it because you selected that record and it's the only one it's showing.
So that's where we have to do that now, right? So we have to now,
Yeah.
similarly to what we did with the update, where we use the primary key and we selected just that thing here to that task. So this is the piece where we're saying
Right.
just this one thing. Don't do anything to anything else.
Okay,
So
but
we're
we're
the
not finished
same-
yet. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah. Yeah. We're doing the same thing here. It's just this is the first step of it. So we're saying, hey, this is what's going to happen now. To Chris's point, we're going to go to the front end, just like we did with the update task. And we're going to write that URL through an A tag that points it back to this view to do this database. So this is the database interaction right here that we're doing basically that boils down to SQL, grabs one thing out of the database and deletes that thing. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
I get what you're doing.
All right. Cool. All right. So then the next step, to your point, is we have to map what? We do a view, then
You have to map the URL.
map the URL. Very good. So the same way that we've done, just like everything else, and very similar to our update, we're going to pass the primary key to this. And this is not really a URL anybody's going to navigate to and spend any time at or anything like that. This is basically going to bounce people off of it. Hold on. I have too many Zoom stuff here in the way to function properly. So I'm going to just copy and paste this and make the updates for deleting because it's going to follow the same pattern very, very similarly as updating. So this time just for so we're not going to the same place. We're going to write delete, but we're going to leave the primary key being sent, telling it as a key value pair that it's an integer, right? So this is standard how we do this in the URL. And then we say change our view to delete task. And similarly, the name of this URL is delete task. So following the same pattern we did with update, we just change everything where it said update before to delete. And then we have our URL. So we're going to save that. Okay, then, Michael, this is where we answer your question. The next step is what? Map a URL, and then we do what?
Now you're gonna find a template. You hook it up.
Yep. So this one, remember, we're skipping that step kind of because we're going to use JavaScript to do the confirmation. We're not going to make the only template you would conceivably do with this, and you'll do it if you do the class refactoring into class views. When you do the deletion with the class view, it'll look for a template. So you'll want to make a template.
Mhm.
But this one, since we're using JavaScript, we're going to skip the template step. So the next step after that, the very last step is after the template, navigate, right? So we go to I'm sorry, not use. What am I doing? After all that talk, I go to the wrong place. Okay, so we go to our to-do and we're doing templates because it's an application level function again, just like update was. So we're still going to be back in our view tasks. All right, so once again, we have an option. We have, well, lots of options here. We could put these all over the place, but logically in the same way that we did with update task, and to Chris's point, we're going to tie this delete function to a specific task instance that's on our screen here. So we want to visually also tie it in some way to this. But unlike the update button that people may assume is to like see more information or update or do something with, we don't want to like hide the delete function under something else that's not called delete usually, right? So I want to put an explicit delete button here alongside the thing over here on the side. So we're just going to add a column next to status that has no title. And then we're just going to put delete, it's the word delete, in a button alongside. So this again would be something you would decide in the design section. We're kind of hustling through that design part, but this is one way that we can approach this issue. So up here in our top row, again, so we're in the view tasks -html in our to-do templates to-do directory. And we're in the top level. So where it says we're inside the table element, the first row, which is where our headings are. So we got table header, the title. We think about our site. This is this row up here. Right. So what we want to do is we want to add a column to this row so that there's a column available for everything else. We don't need to do that in Bash. So we're going to add another element just like this with the TH, the table header element, but we're going to leave it blank and put nothing in it. So there's nothing there. So it'll just show up as a space, basically a placeholder, and give us room to down here add ourselves another data element. So again, keep in mind, this is going to do just like we did before. This is inside of our for loop that's going through our tasks object that was passed to our context, and it's each task individually. So this is the thing that's taken out of the database. So here, Michael, is where we're going to make the magic happen, right? So the text that we want to see is just delete task. We could pass in some information if we wanted to about like the task ID, if we really cared to put that kind of thing in there, but it's not important because we'll have all the information displayed up here already with the title and due date and all status and all that stuff. So we can just have delete task generically. Whoop, I'm sorry. And then inside of this, just like we did with our information for up here, we're just going to add an A tag around this. I'm sorry, A. Around our delete task part. Says what we're doing. Boom. So that's the text of it. And now we're going to add our href, right? So here, let me space this down so we can see a little bit better what we're doing.
Remind me again what the A tag does.
The A tag is our link. So this is how we do we're going to do our href inside of it. This is what makes a link a link. So all the links on your site, this new task link, the add task link, the navigation links, these are all A tags. So when we go home, we go to about, we're clicking A tags. Go to our to-do list,
right?
A tag, the add task, A tags. All
Anchor.
Yeah, anchor. Sorry, anchor. That's what it stands for. Yeah, it stands for anchor. And it's
Okay.
anchoring to a reference point. So this hyperlink reference is what href stands for, and it is an anchor tag. Very good. All right, so we're going to add our href in a similar pattern to what we did before. Reference the URL that we just mapped, and it'll just be that delete task, and then we have to pass it our task ID, just like we did with the update task. So using Django's tag, curly brackets, percentage sign, we'll close it off to not forget, URL, and then the name of the URL, namespace, delete dash task, close off the string, and then task.id, not a string outside of the string, just task.id. And then what else do we need to do with this? This is giving it the Django function. What else did I say that we're going to do with the delete button?
We're gonna add
Oh,
a
is it getting a pop-up a warning? Are you sure?
Second time, Chris. Hold your tongue, brother. Yes, it is going to add that button. Yes, it's going to add you the JavaScript warning. So we need to do that. All right. So somebody other than Chris, how do we go about adding? Do we remember from our front end thing? How do we go about adding that functionality to this button? We're going to do it here as a front end function is JavaScript. But how do we do it? Do you remember?
we need to add a class.
Add a class.
Kinda like how we have a class for button primary.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I am going to give it a button because then it'll just not be an underlined thing. I'm not going to make it primary, but it'll be a button. But sure. Then what's the name of our? Right. Do you remember?
btn dash delete.
Very good. Yes. So when we follow our naming conventions and we do things like that, we don't have to go back and check. Or we shouldn't have to go back and check because we know that this is what we named it, or we should have named it that. If we didn't name it that, then we made the mistake then, right? And it's good to sometimes follow these sorts of things so that we could do it like that. We don't have to go look it up, right? All right, so now we've done that. We should be able to see this working with the delete button once we reload it on the server side. And refresh. And there we go. So we see it moved everything over a little bit, gave us some space. There's no heading up here, but we have our delete task, and it didn't show up as any sort of special text. When I hover my mouse over, I don't know how well you can see it, but it turns into the little hand to click the button. I'm gonna test it out and hit the delete task button, and I get my JavaScript warning. Hopefully you all can see it on the screen, but it did pop up here at the top. It says you sure don't want to do that. I'm gonna hit OK, see what happens. And it did in fact delete that task. So now I can hit the cancel button and not delete my task. But now we have our delete operation implemented. So if you're following along and you're able to do that, we have a fully functioning web app. That's it. There's nothing else that needs to be done. You can take this and package it, ship it, and make $1 million. This is obviously $1 million to-do list. So any questions about that?
Mine works.
Works?
Yeah.
Very good. So you have all 4 CRUD operations. You can create, read, update, and delete.
Yeah,
Excellent.
everything on here
Excellent.
works. Yeah, I've done an excellent job of copying your code into my files there.
Perfect. Yeah. As long as that's what I'm saying. As long as you can plug it in and make it work. There is no shame in copying it. You saw me copying and pasting my own code earlier just now. It's the same thing, man.
Is there a reason why the delete task text is not lining up well with the other?
Probably because
I
it's
was
a
just about to ask that.
probably because it's a button. Here, let's do this. Let's try taking this aspect off and see if it just makes it an A tag with this button delete and see if that helps. So this is again why I'm not a good front end developer, because I don't care about stuff like that. Y'all are looking at y'all are looking at that being all annoyed, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. No, but here, hold up. Let's see if that does it. So yeah, so it's because and here I can show you actually again. Let's put that back in there. So that this button class, well, here I can make it just visible with primary. And then it should make it all blue like the add the add task button. But when it just added the button class.
But that lined it up well.
Nope, that didn't do anything. Okay. So let's do button and put it back there and see if we can get that to.
And button secondary, I think all it does is change the color on it, right?
No, so this basically what it's doing is just giving us like some border and giving it some more big space around it, right? So if we see that, you can kind of see it there, but if I inspect, then we can see the whole space of that button is this big thing right here that's taking up space, and this is just the to-do list item.
Okay, so it's probably more to do with the task or the text in the other ones in the justification.
Well, so I mean, there's a couple ways you go about this, right? Like, so this
row.
Button, it's about the button, right? So it's this is the new thing that's in here. So you could make these conform to it in some way by like wrapping them in something else to make space for this. Or
Well,
I
when
mean,
you
yeah,
look at the padding of to do,
yeah,
it's in the upper left corner, as you would expect text to be in a normal English speaking country. You know, that's just where we start, upper left.
sure.
So I think if you were to justify that text top to bottom,
It could, yeah.
you know what I mean? Yeah, you could
again, man, like, so
pull
when
the
you
other
say,
text
oh, I could
down
just line it
instead of
up and
trying to shove
justify it,
delete
and
up.
then
Yeah,
this is exactly what I want you to do now is take your thing, build it up to this point, and then try lining it up, because trust me, you'll be like, oh, it's gonna be simple. I'm just gonna line this up, and then 3 days later you have everything rearranged on your page because you're lining everything else up, or things are slipping along in other ways. So absolutely, man, like this is now, if you have it to this point, this should be seen as an exceptionally rough but functional as a basic level application that's live on the web that you can show other people, and you can make whatever you want to, right? So now what you could do is you could take this, and instead of having tasks, make it a blog and put in your own blog posts and stuff like that, or make it some sort of social media thing. Like, this is a social media. You can have Cody, we kind of talked about earlier, breaking this out into different users having their own views. You can very easily do that with what we've done so far. You just have to grab the user out of you have to set up an entire login flow, which takes a little while. It's some effort, but that's built into Django, and there's really good tutorials and ways to do that. And you have the project built in. You'll just probably want to make a new app that does the user login stuff. And then you can have them log into this and then start using all the stuff built into Django to say, like, show each user. When we did our filtering in the views, instead of filtering by IDs, we filter by user IDs. You know what I mean? So it's the same kind of stuff we've done here. You can start using these things that we did already, and instead of creating tasks, you're creating, again, social media posts and saving pictures or uploading files, and doing all that kind of stuff. So now that you have all these pieces in place, if you've been following along, whether in class or online, in videos afterwards, this is now a fully functioning, fully complete web app that's live that you can go to. Like, if you wanted to, you can go to my website now. I didn't block it in any way. So you should be able to go to it on your phone and all that too, and play around with it. So any broad questions about that? We've got some time left, and I did want to kind of step through refactoring into classes or why you might do that. And it's in the documentation. So something I wanted to cover at least partially, but I want to make sure that we're clear on this up to now, because this is the thing that we promised at bootcamp, that we'd be able to build a fully functioning web app, and we have. So now we have it. So we're there.
Okay, yeah, I got the gist of it.
Cool. Cool. Anything coming to mind questions wise, or you want to dive in and do a little bit of refactoring into task or into class-based views?
Let's try some refactoring.
Let's
I'm
try some
curious how that
refactoring.
would work.
Yeah, cool. All right, so to refactor into class-based views is, really again, mostly a decision that you're going to make at some point, based on your level of comfort with them and how you understand them working. But the beauty of them and why you might want to do it is it leverages the general ability of Python classes to inherit from parent classes. And Django's got a bunch of these things that we just did explicitly in functions up here for the CRUD operations. Like I said, CRUD operations are exceptionally common. So they've already built these classes. So what we can do is just leverage these classes that exist and do whatever we like with them. So the first things that we're going to do is we're going to import those classes that are the parent classes that we're going to use to inherit from. So like we've done in our other import statements at the top of our to-do views.py, we're going to from django.views.generic. And this is going to give us, I'm going to say import. All right. So we're going to give it a list of names that we want to import as generic views. And this is going to follow, mostly following CRUD in its most logical sense. The only real difference is going to be in the read, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. The first one is going to be exactly what we would expect. It's going to be create view, right? Again, these generic views, they're class-based, so we're doing classes. They're uppercase, they're camel-cased, right? So we got uppercase. Again, I think it's technically called something other than camel, but first thing's capitalized, second one's capitalized as well. So create view, comma, and then we're going to do our read. So read is not called read because if you think about it, there's several ways that things can be read when they're looked at, right? So we're talking about the view that a user is looking at. In our case, it's a list view of all the tasks in the to-do list, right? The other scenario that's possible that's in here as a generic view is called a detail view. That's if we opened up, it's like say we clicked on one of the tasks and instead of updating it, it just gave us more information about it. Like if you had notes or assignees or departments or some other things that you want to just read about a task but not change, that's what a detail view would be for. Or like, again, if you make something with users, you might want to have each user have their own detail view. But for us, we're going to use a list view, right? So that's going to be our read operation. And then the other two are going to be just what they're called all the time. So update view and delete view. Okay, so we're going to import all these at the top, just so we have them. And then let's roll down.
What was the caution flag there?
Which one?
The line you used.
Oh, yeah, no, because I hit save before I use these. So this is just telling me, hey, you imported these things, but you haven't used them yet. See, that says imported but unused. Okay. Yeah, it is. That's helpful in a thing that'll just like remind you to use these things, and not import stuff you're not using. And I dig that. That's helpful. But I know I'm not using them yet, so not an issue. But thanks for catching it. Good call.
Would it still run if you just?
Yeah, it would. Absolutely. That's a good question. If we saved and ran it now, this is, yeah, it'll, if you have unused packages, it's not going to break anything. It's just bad practice because you're just going to have a bunch of junk in there that's ultimately might slow stuff down and it's untidy, but it won't break anything. Good question, though. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do our class-based views in the way we've done any other Python class, which use the word class. And then Django convention is to define what it is we're going to do. And then we're going to do let's start with our update view first. Just to change that to our first refactored view from up here. So we're going to start with update. So when you task update view, and we're going to pass it as an inheritance, right? The parent class update view that we imported. So I'm going to update that. And now in any other of these classes, so what we could do is we could grab a form and use the form that we made before and grab it from that other place and put it in there as we did up here. We did our task form and I showed you that way that was in another file. It's very handy, especially when you're doing your functional views. because we're doing classes, that is also a class. That class could have been defined here. And at the size that we're at, these can be defined directly in the class that we're making in the view, right? So this is, we're updating things. We can do our whole model call as an attribute here. And then the fields call that we did in our forms.py, we can do that here instead, right? So on something that's this size and small. So this, again, this is not necessarily the best thing you want to do. This gives you flexibility to say, okay, I want to just use these parts of something I know has a lot more parts. If I just want to update these specific fields, and then you can maintain it here. If you know you just want to do all of that logic and all that updating and everything out in your forms.py, you can reference that here with a form field. I'm just showing this as an optional, again, since this is refactoring, an optional way to be explicit and just do a form here and not reference a form anywhere else and do anything else with forms at all. You can just do it directly here in the class. And then it's going to take another template, or I'm sorry, another attribute called template name. And again, all these model fields and template name attribute names, I'm not coming with these off the top of my head. These are built in. These are built into the generic views, and it's what they expect. So we're going to give it the explicit direction to the template that we want to use. And remember, we called this create-update-task.html. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a success underscore URL. And we're going to define that as our /to-do, as a to-do string. So this is basically just telling you where to go once it's done. So this template name is where to go, pretty much what we said explicitly on where to go at the beginning, right? And this is going to give the blank template that just has all the information that you need. And then this is going to say which place to send them as the to-do, or as the URL for success, right? So it's going to go to this place and give it to the right spot from there, following the URL that you give it. Right. So any questions about that? That's it. That's the whole view. That's the whole class base. That's why one of the reasons that it's so much faster going this way is because a lot less you have to be explicit about. You just use all the stuff that's built in, the redirections and all that kind of stuff, and like what to grab where, how to grab it. This is much easier, right? So then we can similarly update the other ones, our other CRUD operations. So we did our update view. We could do the creation. Did this a little bit out of order, but we do creation first. So we do task, create, view. Use the generic create view. And we do the same thing. So we could do model. We could do form like we did and didn't do the generic form. But this gives us the flexibility to take different fields. And again, showing the option of doing it explicitly. Tell it what we want to take out of this. Title, do, status. And then the same template. I mean, this is really going to be honestly mostly the same stuff. So we're just going to take a template name and our success URL because we use the same template, the same success. We'll do the same thing. We're just going to do the routing of this through in the URLs and show which one of these classes to use. So again, this is going to give us the flexibility here to use different parts of this if we wanted to. There are sometimes reasons you want to use different forms. This is kind of showing you the way that you could do this. In our case, it's so small, we're not going to do different ones. But this is showing that you can explicitly grab those things. In our case, it's too small to really do much of a difference there. All right, so to do the generic list view that we're going to do for everything else, we're going to do task list view. And it's going to take, again, the generic list view that we showed. This is our read operation. And it's just going to take in our model like we've done before. All these classes take which model it wants to do. Right? And then we're going to do a template name like we did. Set it to our to-do /view tasks.html. Right? And then we're going to give it a context object name. And what do we think this might be? Where have we seen this before? In the context of our list view that we made. Let's roll and have a look. Anybody before I get there?
Read.
right here. Here's our context. We sent it tasks, remember? Remember we sent it this? Because it's our task object when we did it as a function.
Vaguely. Yes.
So this is the same thing that we did every time. The context object in our functional views is the thing that we send to the front end and then we then reference. And again, remember we say task.name is this, task.dueDate or task.title is this, task.dueDate is this. This in the views is how we did that. So the context is the thing sent to the front. The object in there is the thing that we grabbed from the database. Tracking?
Got
We
it.
did this every functional view we've done so far. We sent a context object with either a form or a tasks or a form and a task. Cool. So this is something we've seen before. So when we get down to our class-based view and we do a context object name, we want to give it the name of the thing that we already have in our front end that we're looking through, right? Which we know is, whoa, don't have to yell about it, tasks, plural, right? Because remember, as we list our tasks here, we say for task in tasks, and we loop through them, right? We expect it to be called tasks. So that's what we're saying here. So we call this really whatever we wanted to, but we already know that the thing that we have called it in the front end is tasks. So we should call it that now. We could call it something else, but then we have to go change that somewhere else. Does that make any sense on what this is?
Yeah, I know.
Does that have any relation to meta?
Not from the form. You
Yeah.
mean from the form class? No, not specifically. No, it's the context object is getting sent over, and we'll see it again. I can highlight again
Okay.
where it is here in a second. Let's get this delete view written out. I'm going to show you where that goes, what this context object is exactly, so that we're clear on that. So let's get this delete view written out real quick, just so we can show that where it's connected and have this done. We don't have to come back, right? So in the delete view, we'll keep this in mind as kind of a lingering question, what this context object is. I'm going to show you exactly what it is, so we're really clear on that, right? So, all right, so in our delete view, we're going to do the same thing. Our model is going to be a task. We're going to go with the template name, which we know is going to be one that we haven't made because we used JavaScript for this before, right? So if we put this over into our standard convention, we're going to call it confirm delete task. That's what we should call it, but it doesn't exist yet. So we have to go make this template if we're going to use our class-based view for deletion. And then similar to our update and create, we have to pass a success URL. There's other ways to set this and tell it where to go. But this is how you do it. This is one of the ways to do it, is setting explicitly a success URL and then giving it the to do as kind of like the home, which is the home, which will show us the view, basically the view tasks, HTML. All right, so now we have to do what? So we've written views. I'm gonna save this. And what do we have to do? First of all, Michael, let's scroll up and see if that error went away on row 4, and it did when I saved it. Now I'm using those. So, all right, so now that we've written our views, what's the next step?
Let me see, written views, then we have to map our URL, right?
Map our URLs, right? So our URLs, they are technically already mapped, but they're mapped in functional ways, right? So we have to do these, we have to refactor this part as well. I'm going to show you something really cool before we do that, as sort of to let you know that this is possible. And if you forget how to do this refactoring and all the things we're doing in here, in our built-in project level URLs. So I'm going up here. When you start every Django project, the project level URLs that come standard with the Django thing entirely is going to have this string up at the top that explains a whole bunch of different stuff. But it also has this little explanation of function views and class-based views and what the path is supposed to look like for each. So here up on line 9 is the example of the URL patterns that we've been doing so far for function-based views. And what we're about to do is refactor into class-based views. As you can see, it's just a slightly different way of doing. You have to import the view like this using the class name explicitly that you want to import. And then you have to do this bit of syntax where it says the class name dot as view is the other change you have to make. So if you forget any of that, this is built in directly to it. That includes the thing we did with include earlier and all that kind of stuff. So this is sort of a syntactic reminder of how to write these different sorts of views in the URL. So let's go to our project level, or I'm sorry, not our project level view. That's in the project level URLs. We're going to go to our application level URLs. And we're going to refactor our code to conform to those standards of class-based views. So the first thing we have to do is import our new class-based views. So from .views, the way we've imported classes before. So we're going to import, and then it's specifically the names that we just created. So task create view, task list view, task update view. Swear. All right, and then task delete view. What am I doing here? Okay. So we got task create view, task list view, task update view, and task delete view. So those are our CRUD operations. And now we have to make the changes down here to how they're referenced. So instead of doing views dot name of the view, again, we're going to do what's the name of the class-based view. So capital task. And since we're doing view tasks, we're going to do the list view, the first one, and then dot as lowercase underscore view, open and close parentheses. So this is the change that we have to make for all of these, where we do, whoa. So I'm going to change this to task. This is create, so it's create view. We don't have to change the names or any of that. That reference is going to be exactly as it was. We don't have to do anything other than change our references to which views we're using. Oh, I accidentally fat fingered to control. So I'm going to write this out entirely. So task, we're doing update. So update view dot as underscore view, open close parentheses. And then same thing here for delete. Task delete view as underscore view. Cool. So now we imported. And now it's going to give us that same warning. It says, hey, you got this import statement you're not using. It won't break anything again. We'll show you that, Michael, right now. So I'll just leave this alone. I was going to comment it out to get rid of that error, but we can leave it because it shouldn't break anything. So
That last view is typoed.
is it? Ah, which one? Delete.
The last, very
Task.
last
As
one.
view. The last, thank you. The last word view. Right, there we go.
Your right hand's just a little too eager.
Telling you, man, it is. It's
Yeah,
like,
you're
it's
hitting that eye before.
I apparently didn't grab the I
Left
before
hand.
E, man. It's just
Yeah.
not working. All right, so now since this is one that we bypassed making a template earlier, we do have to now make a template, right? So we have to make our confirm delete task.html template. So we can just do that in our GUI directly. We can do it back in the console if you want to. It's really kind of up to you. I'm just going to do it here in the GUI. So we're going to go into our to-do templates. So to-do templates, to-do, and then we're going to create, not a directory, under where it says files, or create a new file. So we're going to say confirm. Look, I've already written that. So confirm dash delete dash task.html should be the name of what we're looking for. Say new file. All right, so this isn't going to be a whole lot. This is going to be real simple, that we're just going to basically say, hey, you sure you want to do that? And then we're going to redirect them back to another place if they want to cancel. But the submit is going to confirm. So we basically just say, all right, cool, man. You sure you want to delete this task? Give them a confirm button. So it's basically rewriting what we did in JavaScript, but bypassing the JavaScript. So since we're in Django, we're going to do the same thing we do in every template when we start one, is use our extends tag at the top. So I'm going to close these brackets before I forget, but we extend and then which template as a string. We're going to extend our base.html as a string. And then if you recall, we put this in another set of Django tags, which I'm going to close before forgetting. The reserved word block, and then we used content is the name of our block, which could have been an arbitrary name, but since we know that is the name in the middle of our base.html, that's the one we're going to use here. And then we're going to use our end block once again before we forget, because it's very easy to forget that. Okay, so in here, we're going to have a very simple HTML page with a paragraph that just says, are you sure you want to delete task And then we'll just give the number that we want, right? So number, and then we'll use the double curly brackets to grab what we know is the task.id, because we know that that should be available in here. Or should be. We'll see. And then we're going to give it a form with just a button, right? So we're going to use the HTML form like we have before. We'll say method equals. And I think I'm seeing another typo in the documentation. I don't think it's going to break anything and shouldn't matter, but this is written as lowercase, the method string. I don't think it'll break anything, but I'll update the docs to make sure that it is consistent with that. So capital post, and then we're going to use our, does anybody remember what we have to put in forms? We talked about a little bit, but it's a little bit slippery. Remember what it's called? Or even what I'm talking about? Again?
Token?
Yeah, it's a token. Do you remember? Very good. CSRF, cross-site
yeah.
reference forgery token. Very good. Right. So all forms, put that in there. Security measure, built-in thing in Django, good to use. So in this form, we're not going to do, it's not really a form. We're just giving them a button, right? Whoa. And we're going to say that that is a submit button. So it's basically what we did with our form before, but just a submit button with the text confirm on the inside of it. And that's it. And then we're also going to give them, again, if they don't want to, some way to not do it. So we'll give them an A tag or an anchor tag with an href pointing back to, well, actually, let's close the tag and then put on the inside with an href pointing to back to our view, our main views URL, right? So our task, our view tasks URL. Using the Django tag, there you go. And our reverse to do view, not misspelled, hopefully, tasks as a string. And then we'll put in here cancel, much like we did with our other form, but just the cancel buttons. And that's it. And then the last thing we got to do is take the JavaScript. I totally blanked on the word. Take the JavaScript off of our front end template just because we don't need that anymore. We're doing that with this. So let's go back up one into our view tasks with our JavaScript reference. And we can just take that out. Button delete. And leave it just as a regular button. All right, so we save and reload on the server side. And this should be, unless I made some ridiculous errors. Normally when we refactor something like that, I wouldn't just do all four in one shot and hope it worked. I would typically do it like one piece at a time, one function at a time, one view at a time, and then test it, right? So this is definitely bad practice for the sake of time to make sure that we can hit during the class. But I just reloaded, refreshed, nothing broke. So it looks like it may have, if the view it at least worked. I can still navigate around the page, generally get back to my to-do list. It shows the one that exists. So reading works. The buttons still look like they button. Let's try clicking a few of them. We got add task. So, man, I just can't write anymore. Another task. And let's say we got till next year to do. Submit works, and we got our new task here. We can update it. We can delete with our new confirmation. It did say, hey, are you sure you want to delete this task? We got to confirm. We got cancel. Let's try canceling, see if we still have it. So the cancel works, took us back. Delete it again. Say, hey, you sure you want to do that? Let's confirm. And then there, delete it. So we refactored very quickly into our class-based views. And you see how much quicker that is to write those views and how much less code really you're writing when you leverage the inheritance in Python classes. So that's really the power of this is full on doing that. I mean, you can do it in functions the way we did, and that was explicit. That was helpful to understand kind of the whole flow of how everything is working. And that is what these class-based views are doing under the hood. It's just that create, view, update, create, read, update, and delete are so generic that Django's got built in. You can just pull down the functionality and use it. Any questions about that?
If you do wind up having customizations you have to do. You put that underneath the class and it just becomes another dot method that you would execute.
Basically, yeah, yeah, you can do all manner of customization here. So a lot of the, um, place where you do form validation, and if, for instance, you wanted to do some custom things here, like,
But define update task would go underneath the class update.
Yeah. So what you would do is,
right?
yeah. So like if you want to do any of those things, you do like a method down here that would do, you do and you would, again, these methods are built in and it's automatically validating the form instead of us when we did the function, we had to explicitly go through the step and say, all right, cool. Now use the built-in thing from forms that's a built-in method. But here in these built-in classes, it's all built up, rolled up into that view. So you can override any of that function here by explicitly calling a method the way we have before, right? Like a define and then say like is valid. And then, you got to do like self and all that stuff like you normally do. And then you can just override basically or add to or supplement the functionality that's inherited or make your own things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Just like you do with any class. But just to get the very basic functionality that you saw of just adding and updating, reading and all those things, you don't even need to get any methods written. You could just use attributes and use the built-in methods that are so generic, everyone does them without you having to be explicit, unless, like you said, you want to override them. But then, yeah, that's how you would do it, is just write it explicitly in here. That's a good question. There's all kinds
fields,
of
those become the rendered column headers and all that stuff. It just is using those details to become the next thing without you having to explicitly say it. You already said it there. Yeah, these are what you see. The model shows it everything, of course, but then I want
see
what
happens. So I just removed that from the update task, and now see I can't update the status anymore. Right. So I just removed that field out of my list. And so it's just saying what fields are available. So like if you had a reason to grab different fields from the model and only allow users to update those, you can really quickly make those changes here and not.
Or if you just wanted to keep them hidden, that they're irrelevant to the user.
Exactly.
Not a part of what you want, but you need it.
Don't want them to see it here on the front end.
Yeah.
Oh,
or it's just all for background process and not part of what you have to show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So all that stuff again, it's just like these are real simple ways to not have to be so explicit about all this stuff and grab some functionality that's built in, not have to explicitly set those context objects, right? So tasks, again, let's go over what that is. So this context object is, once again, let's go up to where we use it. So we use it in our template, in the front end template itself. So we got a to do, templates to do, and then view tasks. So here's that task object right here. So when we do, I should actually just have kept that open. I'm sorry. Let's go. I'm going to keep that view open. We'll flip back and forth in between them to make sure this is really explicit. I know we're at time right now. I want to get this explanation in real quick and then we can wrap up. But this, I want to make sure is very, very clear because we've been doing this the whole time, right? So the context here that we sent has tasks. So this is our functional based view or view tasks. And we have in this context object, we explicitly sent tasks. And then in our front end, the view tasks.html, we reference that exact thing right here in line 14, tasks. That's the object that we're sending from our view in the context. And it's sent here in our renderer call to the front end, right? So we're calling, so this is where that thing exists. And it is a group of all the tasks that are in there. So everybody following that?
Yeah, it's a dictionary, right? So it's a key value pair.
Yep. So it's called whatever we call it here. This is just the name of it. And then this is the actual thing that it is. It's the database
like
object.
An array of all the.
Yeah, I think it's a list, but yeah, array.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, list in Python, but yes, array. Yeah. And then so when we did the class-based view, it's doing the exact same thing, right? It's going and grabbing all the stuff like we did in the function view right here, where we said what to do and where to grab it and all that stuff. In the class-based view, it is doing that right here. It's doing all that. We just tell it what model to grab, and it's going, doing the view, grabbing all that stuff, and boils it down to SQL and does all that great stuff. What we're doing here is just telling it what to call that thing when it sends it back to the context. So this line right here is quite literally the same as this, or I'm sorry, on the view. This right here is we're setting this variable name so that when we go to our front end template, we can use it in our logic to actually grab the specific task we want out of this collection, Chris, to your
Right.
point, the array, the list of tasks.
'Cause you're
Everybody
just
tracking on that?
looking
That making sense?
For that within the array, and it's just iterating through it. Yeah.
Exactly. So then here is where we grab each individual thing out of that array and just loop through it, grab each piece out of that list and display it up on the screen one at a time on our to-do list. Right. So this is the task. And when we have multiple tasks, that's the array, is all the tasks that are in that list. Tracking, that makes sense? Or did I just lose everybody further?
No. Oh, it makes sense.
I
It's
get what
just,
you're doing.
Yeah, you're good? All right.
it is a lot to process.
It is a lot to process. I do understand that. And again, we are at time. I know we covered a lot today, but that's it. That's the app, right? So now you can build quite literally, you could build the next Uber or Google, whatever the hell you want to do. This is the beginning of it. This is how you do it. This is how you get it working. This is how you get it out there live and make it something that interactive for end users. On Thursday, we're going to talk a little more again about how to say this kind of work, collaborate with others, and go from there. Please play around with these things, practice, ask more questions that they come up with between now and then. And if nothing else today, I'll wrap up there and we can end the recording.
Okay. All right. I'll see you Thursday.
All right. See you Thursday.
Night, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
My site broke for some reason.
Yeah. You want to hang out for a second and have a look at it? Because I see
Yeah,
that
sure.
thing. Yeah. Sure. I'm going to stop the recording. We'll have a look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.